The FNCS Invitational is this weekend in North Carolina. Epic Games has flown up 50 of the best teams from around the world to compete for $1 million in the FNCS trophy. Let's take a look at all 50 of these teams and one thing they do well. First up, we have iDrop and Mr. Savage, who claim the low ground at the end of second moving, and when the third moving pulls, Mr. Savage builds a massive tarp in order to get the maximum amount of angles to find kills onto players on his low ground. Mr. Savage values the space and opportunities that these large tarps give him because although he runs out of mats faster, making these tarps like this is a more reliable way to find refreshes. Next, let's take a look at how Pablo and Swag took height in a very unique way. Pablo and Swag have a first moving on the Sanctuary statue and use it to rotate the first moving, but this team stays in the glider zone while the zone is already on them. This allows them to be the last team gliding on the first moving, which allows them to easily take height and get a greater placement in this game. Looking at some more high ground retakes, we have Queasy and Vino, who have a ton of materials on the second moving, and as a result, they elevate themselves onto a higher layer. Then Queasy tarps towards the front side of the second moving zone and sprays back while Vino goes to lurk at the back side of the zone, pinching Aqua and Reason off the high ground and giving it to Queasy and Vino, who win the game off this play. Moving away from the end game, let's look at how Thomas and Tripperin fight in the mid game. Tripperin and Thomas are a very aggressive team, and in this game in the Elite Cup, they got 29 kills. Throughout their mid game fights, they abused the chili chuck splashes to get unexpected shots and walls at speeds that the opponents weren't used to, which allowed them to clean up fights extremely quickly. Continuing on in the mid game, we have Clown and Resguard, who position themselves on the blimp in order to get Storm Surge. This gives them a good line of sight onto players, but also if they get tagged, they can just go into the vault and recover all of their heals. Going back into the end game, we have Roban, who is solo clutching in game 1 of the Elite Cup finals, and notices that the high ground team is playing like they have no mats because they aren't building when he is shooting at them. Despite Roban being a solo, he still takes this opportunity to take height and solo clutch out a top 3. Moving off the high ground and onto the low ground on the third moving, Stompy is fighting for the low ground, but instead of trying to push the team off low ground, Stompy instead plays onto the far right side of the zone because the zone is expanding in that direction, which will eventually give Stompy the front side of the zone. Switching back to height again, we see that Rifty is holding height at the end of first moving, and when the second moving plays max distance, Rifty takes no chances and immediately hits a launch pad and lands on the front side to make sure that no one can take back his height. Moving earlier into the game, Hydro and Belusi see loot from a knocked player and they instantly build over it to claim the loot. There isn't even a second of hesitation, and this allows them to refresh their mats going into the first moving. Speaking of more ways to refresh their mats, we see this when the second moving pulls. Mixon throws down a Chrome Splash and instantly dashes to the front side where he gets out and starts his tarp. This dash saves himself a ton of materials and a tarp that would have been needed to put himself in the same position. Leaving the mid ground and moving to the low ground, Vidil and Janice deep tarp into the third moving zone, and they are the deepest team into the third moving zone compared to anyone else in the lobby. This allows them to claim the front side low ground when the final moving plays max distance. This single play lets Janice and Vidil have the low ground for the rest of the game until they lose the final 2v2 to Vino on height. From easy low ground claims to easy high ground claims, you can go over to Joe and Z Andy, who have a launch pad on the first moving, but they choose not to use it on the first moving, and instead they run along the low ground and get a free rotate because the majority of the lobby is using their launch pad, so this rotate becomes extremely free. This then gives them the opportunity to use a launch pad on the second moving to land on the high ground and win the game. We've covered the low ground and the high ground a lot recently, but what about the mid ground? Well, Hen and Vortex get into the second moving zone and immediately try to clear their lair by spraying off any teams near them. This makes the rotates later in the end game easier because they don't have to worry about any teams on their lair. Continuing in the mid ground, we see that Chicho and Trulex look for a pre-edit play on the team below them, and because Chicho is carrying the Ranger shotgun, they are able to take this fight from a tile and a half away while still being able to get the kill, making this play much safer. Moving back to the low ground, Bevies and Vortexers are on a tarp on the first moving, and Bevies identifies that Jew is about to run right next to his tarp. Bevy reacts to this by placing the cone and floor where Jew is about to run. Then Bevies edits these two pieces and drops Jew down, allowing himself and Vortexers to find the kill. Let's move off the low ground and back up to the high ground, where in this game Aqua is on height at the start of the first moving and launch pads, and then double dips his launch pad again to re-land on the high ground and hold it for the rest of the game. Moving back again to the mid ground, we see that when Tayson and Chapix tarp and Wood in the later moving zones, they don't even take the risk of being sprayed up by instantly chrome splashing their tarp, so that their builds have much more HP and so that height changes their focus off them. Continuing on the mid ground, Mustache and Malabuka are looking to low pad second moving, but they take 1 second to scout their path and realize that if they do it the standard straight low pad, they will go right into a wall. Malabuka adapts to this by just changing the direction of the low pad on the fly, and they still get all the same benefits from this change while not getting blocked. Moving down to the low ground, we see that Pinkin and Nass are in a very congested spot in the third moving zone, so they go into the zone with their chug splashes and cut around where the zone is going to be. This puts them ahead of the congestion and gives them a much cleaner rotate. From easy low ground claims, let's move on to an easy height take when on the second moving, Bad Sniper hits a launch pad and sees that height is not paying attention. Bad Sniper instantly jumps on this opportunity and takes the height off this player by landing and just simply building over him. This opportunistic play from Bad Sniper allows him and Noah Riley to win this game. Moving towards the end of the game, Biko is solo clutching in the final moving and gets a med mist. Instead of trying to run into the zone where you will almost certainly die, Biko decides to play out his med mist in the zone, and this gives him one extra placement point that didn't matter in this tournament but could be the difference between thousands of dollars in the invitational. Continue with late plays. Cammy and Seti have been tarping this whole game at high elevation because the zone is playing near and around the Rave Cave, but as soon as the final moving pulls, Seti sees that it doesn't play up a hill, so Seti makes a beeline towards the front side of low ground and tries to claim it so that he and Cammy can get a top 2. Unfortunately, Seti gets a little too aggressive for some loot, and it gets Cammy killed, but this low ground claim still clutches them out at top 2. Continuing again on the low ground, Fatch and Pamster are in the final moving on the low ground, and they make a large tarp in the zone. This allows them to have time to look for a ton of kills and clear out the game while they don't have to continue tarping towards the front side of the zone because they have already established a tarp. This also prevented them from getting randomly griefed, which allowed them to win this game. Going back to the earlier moving zones, we have Avery and Commandment who use Chrome Splashes in the endgame to consistently save a ton of materials, and they try to make sure that they're constantly Chrome Splashing on the dead side of the moving zone in order to avoid getting boxed by anyone while they are in Chrome. From saving mats to finding mats, Smite and Larson see a team on their lair that they want to fight, and they set up a quick pinch in the middle of the endgame in order to collapse on Panda and tapping and get the kills. This is a super unexpected play, and it is super hard to counter in the middle of the endgame. Moving back to the low ground, when the second moving pulls, Scented instantly sprints towards the front side of the second moving. This claims the low ground because of their complete lack of hesitation. This play resulted in Cold and Scented holding the low ground for the rest of the game, which they eventually won. Traveling back to the first moving, Booga, instead of looking back towards the back side of the zone, Booga looks forward towards the front side of the zone to try and pick off a glider, and in this game he was able to pick up a kill from this play. Moving from the first moving to the second moving, Jamper is looking for a good place to launch pad from, and he can't find a clear path. Jamper decides to go into the zone away from the builds, which finds him a clear path which he is able to launch pad to the second moving from. From one desperate situation to another, Clicks and Dukes are in a zero mat situation and realize that they need to completely commit to a play or their game is over. Clicks shows his insane confidence here by completely jumping into a duelist box. Normally this would be an awful play, but because Clicks has no mats, this is very important that Clicks completely trusts himself to make this play, and it ends up working out for him. From dire situations to solo clutches, Acorn, every time a duo begins to even look at him, he instantly throws down a Chrome Splash onto his wall so that he won't get pushed by a duo. This allows Acorn to avoid being picked off as a solo, as he's able to solo clutch this game out from the first moving to a win. We've looked at a lot of height takes, but what about holding height? Well, Pars and Raze are in the first moving zone, and they pad towards the front side, and then they see that height is free. Although Pars and Raze are able to get an easy height take, they still have to hold it, especially with there being a ton of players still flying through the sky. Raze and Pars actively build above the highest glider to make sure that they don't get landed on, and from this play, they're able to hold onto height for the rest of the game and win it. Going back down to the mid ground, Reet and Epic Whale need a refresh play at the start of second moving, and so they look at their options and choose to fight Kaden and Turtle Tavern because they are distracted spraying another team. Epic Whale uses this opportunity to get free edits onto Kaden and Tavern and pick up both kills, extending their game. Looking at more endgame refreshes, On1 and Baka are in the first moving zone, and they see that Peepoclip is alone as a solo near them. Baka and On1 are an extremely opportunistic duo, and they immediately look for a play onto Peepo, and On1 is able to grab the wall and get the points and loot from this kill. We've looked at two ways to find endgame refreshes, but what about a way to make sure that you don't get griefed while going for them? Well, Snacky finds a kill in the endgame, and before he even goes for the finish, he makes sure that he claims base for himself in full metal to reduce the odds he gets jumped on while going for the finish. Moving away from kills, Kuel and Yumi use Chrome Splashes to drop massive elevation when the second moving zone plays off a hill. This saves them a ton of mats, and they can get to the front side of the zone while dropping layers. Going right back to the aggressive play, we see King and Ed here fighting right below them and open their floors up to get 2 free kills onto players who are distracted on another fight. Continuing on with the aggressive play, we see that when the second moving pulls and KBR starts to tarp ahead, Zeet stays back and looks for kills. Once Zeet's kill opportunities are gone, he immediately chromes and dashes towards KBR, so that he has the most time to get kills while still being close to his teammate. Looking at some earlier aggression, Novice does a great job of staying on right shoulder peaks from a really safe angles while still applying great pressure. Going back to the endgame, Kitaz and Phison are looking to Chrome Splash towards the low ground when the moving zone plays off a hill. Kitaz preemptively places 2 cones where they're going to Chrome Splash from. This protects them from any initial sprays and allows them to get to the low ground unscathed. Moving off the low ground, we see that Zagu and Marim notice while they're launch padding that Alice is not paying attention on height at all, and they double land on height while they're having this advantage of the surprise. This gives them an easy height take and an easy win. Going down to the mid ground, Runa and Peepoclip are in the second moving and they see a launch pad in the zone. This team makes an aggressive call to play for it, and it allows them to save a ton of mats on their second moving rotation. Continuing on the mid ground, Bailey and Alex see a player who just Chrome Splashed their box. Bailey and Alex respond to this by holding their pumps out right as they expect the blob to come out. This allows them to get an easy double pump and a free kill. Continuing on the mid ground again, but this time as a solo. Jace is in the second moving, and when he goes for a kill, he's only looking to fight players who are already distracted. This nets him an easy kill into Dana, and by doing this, Jace reduces the chances that he gets 1v2'd in endgame by not aggroing any aware duos. Moving back onto the high ground, FKS and Spy hold height on the start of first moving and Chrome Splash to the front side of the first moving, and crank up and hold height for the rest of the game by playing perfect spacing from second height and constantly applying pressure to the whole lobby. Moving to earlier in the game, Alice sees that a team has just built a fresh tarp, meaning that their walls are low HP. Alice takes this opportunity to spray the wall and make it his own and get an easy kill before his opponent can even react. Going back to late in the game, Chimp is deep into the endgame and he runs out of materials. Chimp realizes that if he gets sprayed at by any team, he's probably dead, so he preemptively throws a Chrome Splash onto Booga and Miro's walls so they can't edit and spray at him. Continuing in the endgame, Looter gets hit hard in the moving zones, and Muzz instantly takes over the tarps for him so that he can heal while still maintaining the front side of the zone. Moving all the way back to the early game, Hellfire starts this early game fight off by getting the cone onto his opponent. This allows him to get a few shots shots off, and when the opponent jumps towards Hellfire, he's willing to take the aim 50-50 because he already has the HP advantage. Jumping back to the 50-50 zone, Kanata is in the 50-50 zone on the second height, and the height team is right above him. Kanata edits out all of the walls in his base and chops out the height team, and this play gives Kanata height at the start of the endgame. Finally, moving on to the first moving, Andalex in this endgame gets pressured by Vico and Marine with pre-edits, but Andalex showed the importance of being calm and collected under pressure, which allowed him to execute all the mechanics perfectly, which allowed him to barely survive. This was all the 50 teams that are going to be playing in the Invitational this weekend in North Carolina, and I hope that you guys are a little bit more inclined to watch it now. If you need a good spot to watch it live, go follow my Twitch at twitch.tv/Phoenix, where I will be doing a viewing party of both days live. Peace.